When the government tells you, yes, we want to normalize inflation at 2%, do you know what they're telling you? Yes, we want to steal your money, but we only want to steal it at 2% instead of 6%. It's still stealing your money. Hello YouTubers, Alaska Prepper here. Ladies and gentlemen, don't be fooled by articles like this. Inflation only has one way to go, and that is up. We may have a dip here or there, but in the long run, it will be going up. So today is the best time for you to prepare with those things that you know you're going to need in the future. This article says that U.S. inflation moderates at 6.4%, but price pressures remain. That's almost kind of like an oxymoron. But let me explain to you that the inflation that they're putting out here, that 6.4%, is a lagging indicator. They're telling you what happened last month. But what I'm going to share with you is what's going to happen next month and how you can look for it yourself and see where inflation is truly going. Reading a little bit of this article here, it says that the pace of consumer price increases eased again in January compared with a year earlier. And of course, you know that the government loves to change the way that they measure things. That way, we the people can be fooled into thinking that everything's great when it's really not. The latest sign in the high inflation that has gripped Americans for nearly 2 years is slowly easing. Ladies and gentlemen, do not get fooled by this. The best time for you to prepare is now. Don't wait. Don't try to wait until something is going down in price. If you notice that something is on sale for whatever reason, because remember that today's sale prices are last year's regular prices. So if you can find something on sale by happenstance, go ahead and stock up on that if you use it. But don't stop stocking up just because you think that the price of things are going to go down. They are not, ladies and gentlemen. When they say that inflation is easing, it means the rate of inflation, the rate at which those prices, current prices, are going up. But they've found a floor. Very, very small amount of things, and maybe in localized areas, will prices come down a little bit, but eventually they will find themselves up again because we have made a floor onto what we are paying for things. Inflation is just the rate at which prices go up, but inflation has not eased, not nearly to the levels where they were before the health crisis. And here they continue to say consumer prices climbed 6.4% in January from a year earlier, down from 6.5% in December. It was the 7th straight year-over-year slowdown and well below a recent peak of 9.1% in June. And what I want to go ahead and bring forward to you is this. You know that 9.1% that we recorded in June as far as the CPI? The reason I'm trying to bring this home to you so that you understand. The raise in prices or the rise in prices that 9.1% made is still here. It's just that now, from those prices, from that high of 9.1% year over year, now those prices are still going up, but only at 6.4% as calculated by the CPI. And I want to show you why it is that I have the notion that prices will continue to go up. And that has nothing to do with the CPI. You see, the Consumer Price Index is a lagging indicator. And now we're going to talk about the Producer Price Index, which is a leading indicator, meaning that it's going to show you what's coming in the future. So here from the BLS, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, it states that the Producer Price Index for final demand increased 0.7% in January. Okay, 0.7%. What that means is that it is going to cost, right? It will cost manufacturers, right? Companies that produce things, it's going to cost them 0.7% more in January than it did in December. Okay, so that means that the things that manufacturers produced in January, you can bet that you're going to be paying more for when it finally hits the streets. And usually I would say that they have a 60 to 90 day lag on the things that they manufacture, depending on what it is. And then putting it in a different wording format, a producer price index for an industry is a measurement of changes in prices received for the industry's output sold outside the industry. So they're pretty much saying the same thing that they said before. It's costing them more. So although we had lower inflation by 0.1%, I think it is, for January, we still had higher producer price index for January, means that going forward, they're going to be higher prices because it's costing the manufacturers more to produce something. So now out the door, it's going to end up costing you more. And we also have to remember that we live in a credit-based economy. And what that means is that all the way from the producer, all the way to the consumer, even nowadays, because people are borrowing money just to eat, that they're using credit. So everywhere that there is a break in the line, so from the producer there's a break, and then you go to the truck driver, there's a break, then you go to the wholesaler, there's a break, then you go to the supermarket, there's a break, and then if the final consumer uses credit, it's going to cost even more. So since they're using credit, everywhere there's a break, there's going to be a little bit of a higher price because credit now is more expensive as well. Don't be fooled by them telling you, hey, everything's looking good. And I want to go ahead and cover something really quick before we go on to our next screen here. When the government tells you, yes, we want to normalize inflation at 2%. Do you know what they're telling you? Yes, we want to steal your money, but we only want to steal it at 2% instead of 6%. It's still stealing your money. Because for those of you that don't understand, inflation, the definition of is increasing the money supply. And how does the government increase the money supply? One of two ways, right? They lower rates so that people can borrow more and therefore inflate the money supply in the economy. Therefore, the prices of things go up. And or the government borrows money and then that money goes out into the economy. And when I say the government borrows money, I don't mean the government selling bonds to you, Joe Schmo or Jane Schmo in the street. It means the government selling bonds, banks buying the bonds, and then the Federal Reserve giving the banks the money, which is inflationary. You see, when Joe Schmo or Jane Schmo in the street, when they buy bonds from the government, they're pretty much just lending the government money. But the money that they're lending them is money that they've already earned. It's money that they had in the bank or wherever. But it's money that was already out in the economy. So they're taking that money that was already in the economy, they're transferring it or lending it to the government, and then they're getting a bond for that. So that really doesn't change the money supply in the economy. However, when the government creates bonds, and then banks buy the bonds with your deposits, ladies and gentlemen, by the way, and then they take those bonds and give it to the Federal Reserve in exchange for fiat, that is inflationary. And this last article that I'm going to cover with you here says the producer index hints at where consumer prices are headed. So you see, this article here is being forthcoming. They're pretty much telling you, hey, when you look at the consumer price index, it's a leading indicator, and it gives you an idea as to where prices are headed. So let's take a look at this. And here they say that the new data on Thursday morning shows that U.S. whole prices rose 0.7% in January. Those prices are what suppliers charge businesses and other customers. And that's the biggest jump they've made since June. So you notice how on the other article, they were kind of like biased towards trying to tell you, hey, things are easing up. You know, this is the best CPI that we've had. I think it was since June as well. Here they're telling you that this is the worst PPI that came out since June of last year. All right. This data comes courtesy of the Producer Price Index, brought to you by our friends at the Bureau of Labor Statistics as well. So they tell you what they want you to know, ladies and gentlemen. That's why it's so important for you to do your research so that you can understand how these things work, and therefore it will allow you to better prepare. And here they say different day, different data, but all are pointing to a reversal in inflation, also known as disinflation. I don't believe that that's so. And here they say there is a catch though. We don't appear to be disinflating as quickly as some had hoped. And disinflation, again, is just the rate at which inflation is going down. All right, and inflation is the rate at which inflation is going up. So there's a positive and a negative. And as you can see, we're not really disinflating, ladies and gentlemen. They changed the prices. I mean, they changed the way that they measure the prices. That's one way that they do it. And then they just flat out only tell you what they want you to know. Inflation is sticking around. Energy prices are up 5%, the biggest driver in the rise of prices of goods, and we all know that. On the other hand, food prices for suppliers dropped 1% month over month, which Leary says is a bright spot. They're not taking into consideration here, and I know that this article is a couple of days old, but they're not taking into consideration, ladies and gentlemen, and we have to understand what's going to happen this year with our planting season. I believe that the catastrophe that took place in Ohio and is still taking place, I believe that is going to affect what foods can be grown in that area, if any at all. There are 75,000 farms in Ohio, and I would say that most of them are going to be affected with the contaminants that were released into the air by that controlled burn. So think about all of those farms in that area that won't be able to produce. And I would venture to guess that most people throughout the rest of this year are going to start looking at their labels and asking, where did this food come from, if they do decide to plant in those areas. Over the last 12 months, food was one of the largest sources of inflation for Americans, Leary said, and I believe it will continue to be so, ladies and gentlemen. And to finish it off, they say here, you should care as a consumer about PPI because it is a hint about what's going to happen to your consumer prices in the future. Right, explained this economist. PPI is also an important window into what's happening in the supply chain, she said. The big picture, the latest PPI report shows policymakers are a long way off from declaring victory on inflation. So ladies and gentlemen, continue to prepare because inflation is here to stay. I've been saying that for a while, and I'm going to continue to say it because it is true. That statement is 100% true. Inflation is here to stay. So prepare now. I hope that you have a great rest of your day. God bless America. God bless every one of you. I'm Alaska Prepper. I'm out.